Hi all, this is Maria Clark and welcome to my studio. Today's project is a Christmas in July mandala dot painting for this really pretty Christmas ball ornament. This is something that was voted on by my Facebook group. This was the #1 vote, and so I'm happy to bring this to the group and to you all. If you're interested in joining the group, please check out the description below and I'll have some details there for you. Let's go ahead and get started. The materials that I'm going to be using are pretty basic. I have this Christmas ball that I've had. It's a nice peachy color, and I'll just take this top off and we'll set that aside. We'll use it to help dry a little bit later on to hang it, but we'll go ahead and set that aside. And then I just got a little plastic cup that I will use as a little stand if I need to set it aside for a little bit to dry or just to take a rest. I'm using just 2 colors of paint here that I really think are going to complement the peach background. I'm using this copper and white pearl, and then I have my usual set of dotting tools. I've also got my little stencil that I'm going to use to make grid marks. If you're interested in that stencil, just check out my Etsy shop. I'll have some links below. I've so much appreciated everyone who's purchased these stencils, and I really hope you enjoy them. They've really made my life a lot easier. So I'll use that stencil to just go ahead and put my 4 marks on. When I'm marking an ornament, I don't generally have to put a whole lot of grid lines on, just enough to get me started, because once I get that first row down, then I'm usually pretty good. So there's my 4 marks. I just used a pencil. And now let me get my paint out. Again, just 2 colors, the metallic copper and the metallic white pearl. And it's going to give us a nice, pretty look on this background. So the first hook I'm going to use is my G6 4mm, and I'm going to go ahead and put 4 dots down on each of the marks. And there's going to be a little bit of glare on the bulb, and I hope you're able to see okay. I'll try to change it up a little bit, but I'll go ahead and get my 4 down. Now I'm going to place 4 larger dots in between the little white pearls that I put down, and I'm using my P16 11.5mm in the copper, and I'll go ahead and get those large dots. I'm kind of going for an icicle effect, so we'll see how that works out. So there's my first one, and I'll go ahead and get the rest of these down. Sometimes you have to redot a little bit just to get enough paint on there. This DecoArt Americana paint is the paint that I generally use. I use this most of the time because it's always a nice consistency right out of the bottle. All right, so those are the first elements of the design. Now I'm using my G6 4mm again, and I'm placing right above that, because I'm going to do walking the dots around these, but I want a little larger dot in the center, so you can see I'm just lining those up, and I will get those down first so I'm not changing out tools every time. Line them up. Be sure you're cleaning your tools off really regularly as you go through so that they don't build up. And now I'm using my largest nail dotter, and I will just walk those dots around. So I'm just speeding this up so that you can see the dotting, but we're not going to spend too much time on this. This is pretty basic. The whole pattern on this is really nice to get started with painting these ornaments, because it is a very simple pattern, but it's very, very pretty. So we'll go ahead and walk our dots all the way around. And there's a little close-up of how that's looking. That copper is looking nice on there. Both those colors look great. And now I am using my N15 10mm, and I'm going to go right in between with more copper. Keep in mind that this design is going to kind of drape down and drip down. It's not literally drip, but move down the ball because I'm simulating the icicles. So in between, I will go ahead and use that N15 to get those on. And we're going to follow a pretty repetitious pattern here to get the primary dots and then walk the dots around. And now I'm back to my G6 4mm. And the same thing, I'm a little out of frame here, but I'm putting a dot, the large dot, in the center, and then I'll walk the dots around. Okay, that's the first series. Now I'm ready to go ahead and start placing my other rows down, and I'm going to be using my M13 9mm, and I'm going to be placing that right below that largest dot, and I'll place 4 of that size. Okay, now before I move on to walking the dots, I'm going to put my next series of copper dots down so I can do my dotting with the white pearl in sort of a kind of a continuous segment. So I'll be using my L11 8mm crochet hook to drop another series of dots. You'll see that. That's the L11 8mm. And you can see how I'm just alternating. You'll notice that there's a little bit of marring. These glass balls, the finish on them is really prone to get smudged up with your fingerprints. So I do use a Q-tip to try to smudge out some of those. Some of them I can smudge out, you can see, fairly easily, some not. I'll just, do the best I can. But sometimes the finishes on these are a little bit finicky, especially the ones that are colored. So just kind of be mindful of that as you go through, that you're going to end up with some smudges. Now I'm using my largest nail dotter, and I'm just going to dot around all of these. Okay, we're coming up on the last of that series of walking the dots. You can see the pattern starting to emerge. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set that aside, and I am going to let that fully dry before I move on to the next steps, because it's just getting too far down the bowl. So here we are, we're dry, and now I can set it back in the cup to help me, if I need to, stabilize that. But you can see that the pattern's starting to emerge. It's really pretty. Very simple. And now I'm going to take my next smallest series of copper dots, and I'm using the K 10.5 6.5mm, and I'll just drop another series. And this is on the one that starts with the largest dot. But again, I wouldn't worry too much. The whole point is that you're decreasing the size of the dots as you move down the curve of the ball. And then for the other series, I've just gone down to my my H8 5mm. And just getting a smaller dot. So they're graduated sizes. You could really use any size that worked for you. And I'll set that aside. And then we will start to walk the dots. Okay, we're finishing up that particular series with the walk the dots. And that's how the pattern's emerging so far. I'm going to set that aside. Okay, I'm going to start to add some additional details. I'm going to go down one more size, and I'm using the H8 5mm again to put my fourth copper in the sequence. And then I just use my largest nail daughter to walk those dots around. And I'm going to set that aside to dry. Okay, that's dried. And I'm now going to start to use the white pearl to make some additional sort of icicles. So I'm using the H8 5mm, and I'm just placing that larger dot. And then I will add graduated sizes for the icicle look. And I'll do that all the way around with that, with the H8 5mm. You can see why it's important to sort of put those drying steps in with these, because the handling, I would not anyway be able to not mess up the paint. Now I'm going in with the G6 4mm, and I will put one above and below as I kind of graduating the dots down. These are going to run down the sides of the ornament. And now I'm going to use my largest nail daughter and just start walking those dots. I'll few up and then a few down. And here's my last couple. And you can see that I'm walking those down. And that creates the base of the ornament. Alright, now I've let that completely dry, and here's how it looks. It's easy to handle. I did hang it to dry, so I'm going to go back in and start to do my top dots. And I'm just using the pearl on the copper and the copper on the pearl. And just hit each one of those coppers with that white pearl. And I'll set that aside to dry as well. Now I'm going to go back in with the copper, and I'll just hit, and I'm using a small, because these dots are really small, I'm using a fairly small nail daughter. And I will just drop a bit of copper on each one of those. Now I'm going to go back in and put another copper on each one of those white pearl top dots. And this is just to give it a little bit more depth. You could stop at any point. You could not put top dots on if you didn't want to, but I think it gives it a little bit of depth and, you know, variation, variety, a little bit of kind of texture and interest. But it's not necessary because I think some of these are just absolutely lovely without putting any kind of additional layers of paint. So I'm just going to finish that up. And here's the finished one. Yeah, I thought that turned out really pretty. It's very simple colors, but that's kind of nice on some of these ornaments. You'll have a lot of variety and you have lots of time to, you know, play with different colors. But this nice peach background didn't call for a whole lot of colors. Well, I hope you enjoyed this project. I want to thank you for joining me. I appreciate you. Please consider subscribing, giving me a thumbs up, or leaving a comment. I'd love hearing from you. Thanks so much for joining me in my studio. Take care.